prepare to race onto the field. Everything is riding on this football game. So there's a special intensity, a special urgency. Here come the Volunteers. Wherever you listen throughout the world, it's football time in Tennessee.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Fulke here. I just want to give a shout out to Boogie Bentley, Dauber, and the Indy Kid over at the Talkin Vols network on YouTube. Keep doing your thing, guys. Go Vols.
Welcome to the Talkin Vols network. My name is Boogie Bentley.
I'm Dauber.
And I'm the Indy Kid.
And this is the Fall of the Vols, a limited little mini-series we're doing for you guys, dropping episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, talking about how this football team went to hoisting a national championship trophy in 1998 to hiring 5 coaches over the span of 13 years. We're kind of breaking it down. It's a deep dive. We're talking about recruiting. We're talking about hirings and firings, everything in between. And this is the season of Lane Kiffin, that 1 year. We're going to break it down. We're going to dive in. We're going to break it down, but let's kick it off with this.
We're looking forward to embracing some of the great traditions at University of Tennessee. For instance, the Vol Walk, running through the T, singing Rocky Top all night long after we beat Florida next year. It's going to be a blast. Okay, so get ready.
That is a young, arrogant, full of piss and vinegar Lane Kiffin. Indy Kid, I'm going to kick it off with you because I know where you stood when Lane Kiffin was hired. So let's just start there. The Philip Fulmer era is over. Lane Kiffin is coming in. What were your first impressions? How excited were you? Because I know.
Yeah, I was excited about it. I mean, me being a Raiders fan as well, I knew a little bit of him from his time with the Raiders. And obviously, I thought I saw him do good things with the Raiders, which led me to believe, especially in college, that he would be a real success down there. That was my number one candidate at the time. And, I cannot state how ecstatic it was. I had the It's Time t-shirt. I had a UT visor.
What happened to that? What happened to that It's Time t-shirt? Just to let the people know.
If we had a clip of Hulk Hogan when he comes to the ring, the exact same thing happened. When that, as we'll talk about later in the show, when that announcement he was heading to Southern Cal happened, yep. Not one, but 2 It's Time shirts.
That's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. I was excited too, but look, it kind of has been an ongoing theme throughout this process of the downfall of Tennessee football. When Philip Fulmer left, there was a whole lot of hat under the armpit clapping. All right, clap. All right. We're going to work like heck, all that stuff. Lane Kiffin comes in, and the clip we just showed, we're going to sing Rocky Top in the Swamp. Arrogance, some swagger, something different. And then you kind of look at how things progress. Look at Butch Jones, a used car salesman. So much, just BS and nonsense. You follow that up with Jeremy Pruitt, and we're like, all right, this is a hard-nosed football coach. This is what we need. Then that's a bunch of BS. You get Josh Heupel, and it's like, oh, this is a breath of fresh air. It's kind of been the ups and downs of opposites, polar opposites. Lane Kiffin was the polar opposite of Philip Fulmer. Dauber, what did you think when Lane Kiffin showed up in Knoxville?
I just have to wonder why you totally glossed over Derek Dooley and his shower etiquette.
I didn't want to talk about that. I didn't. I could see the Germans.
Hey, he did put on a good press conference.
Entertaining.
Yeah. I was pumped. It was some excitement. Tennessee had become very predictable, and you knew what you were getting with those Philip Fulmer coach teams. There were ups and downs, and we had some seasons that were good, and then some downturns. But it was a new style. It was Lane Kiffin was the sexy hire. He was the name out there, the big splash. That's what the Tennessee fans wanted. They wanted that big name, that splash hire, that exciting hire, and that's what he brought. And like you said, he came in with that arrogance and that cockiness, kind of brashness, talking about singing Rocky Top all night, guaranteeing to beat Florida, to beat Georgia. And as we get into the season a little bit, I think the team kind of fed off that and reflected his attitude. So I know we kind of teased a little bit on the last episode talking about the Lane Kiffin era. You know, it's the what ifs and what could have been had he not bolted in the middle of the night for Southern Cal. And I mean, granted, it was his dream job, but the Lane train was beginning to roll in Knoxville. We're seeing a team that 2009 season, they were competitive in pretty much every game apart from Ole Miss. And then the bowl game against Virginia Tech, they kind of fell off. But, you know, you're talking about number 1 Florida with Tebow, number 1 Alabama, lost by 2 points. And that was at Alabama, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was.
So this team, and it's pretty much the same roster. There was a little bit of turnover from the following season, Fulmer's last year, that lost to Wyoming. The team that lost to Wyoming is taking the number 1 team in the country deep in the game, and probably should have won that game had Terrence Cody not blocked 2 field goals. So it was. I was excited for what could be and the trajectory that this team had. And then things just changed like that. Switch in the night.
We'll kind of go through it. We'll go through the 09 season and what could have been if Lane Kiffin stayed. But let's start from the beginning. Let's start from, you know, the hiring of Lane Kiffin. Some of the names mentioned, we were trying to recall before we went on air. The 3 names that I have here that were on Mike Hamilton's radar, and there's one big one, but Brian Kelly, Mike Leach, and Gary Patterson. And a lot of people wanted that Gary Patterson hire. Indy Kid, you had some other names that you had looked up too. What other names do you recall on that list?
Yeah, my thought on it was it came down between Kiffin and Troy Calhoun at Air Force. Mike Hamilton was a big fan of Troy Calhoun also. I think that was the main names. And we talked about it. I found an article with Gary Patterson said when he interviewed that teams didn't think he could get the job done at a big school at the time. He kind of felt snubbed by Tennessee. Of course, I think around that same time, Brian Kelly went to Notre Dame. So I don't know how deep that got. There were other candidates as well. I cannot remember, and I can't find a list of all the candidates because this was still this was a top-notch job at the time. It had not lost its luster or anything. But, that's – and again, like I said, Kiffin was the sexy hire at the time. And but, hindsight's 20/20. What happens if you went with Kelly or Patterson or whatever? There may have been more longevity right there, which we never thought would be an issue right there. But, it was a definitely – there was never a dull moment in that season. Let's put it that way.
I think it goes back to the end of last episode when we were talking about the end of the Fulmer era, and was it the firing of Philip Fulmer that sent us down this road, or was it the hiring of Lane Kiffin? And that's the big question mark for me as we unpack all this. I don't know that Lane Kiffin was necessarily the wrong hire. And I was actually talking to a guy at work today just about this same exact conversation, because of the things that Lane Kiffin said at SEC Media Days, talking about the passion of the Tennessee fan base. And I was on board with Lane Kiffin. I don't necessarily know that he was the wrong hire. I don't think we'll ever know, because, Dauber, to your point, what you said, look at the games. Look at the games. Taking Florida, taking Alabama. Tennessee should have won that Alabama game. Like you said, 2 blocked field goals, 1 at the end of the game. And if you want to be a crybaby, and I'll be one, I'll be a crybaby right now. Cody ripped his helmet off. That's a 15-yard penalty. The field goal should have been re-kicked. I'm just saying that's the rule. Don't rip your helmet off. That's neither here nor there. I'm not salty at all. Not salty at all.
Well, where I think the mistake was made in that is that Tennessee had gotten that onside kick. Crompton hit Luke Stocker across the middle for a good gain, and then Tennessee kind of just sat on it. They didn't try to advance, and there was still about a minute left or so. And Lincoln, he always kicked low. And like I said, I think he had one blocked earlier in the game.
Earlier in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So, I mean, they should have definitely tried to advance more up the field. And I remember Kiffin making a comment about, well, it's an Alabama, which is a true statement. It's the officials. You don't want to get a cheap flag or something. And that was his reason for not trying to advance it more. But I think that's where you'd find fault in that. But I'd also go to, for those games he had them in, there's a couple of head-scratcher losses on that schedule as well that, I know you're ready to make a point. Go ahead, and we'll come back to that.
I was just going to say we've got a good buddy who would remind everybody where the SEC home office is.
Yeah, he'd probably go on a rant right about now. But the point I was trying to make is, it's not the firing of Philip Fulmer that sent us down this road. It's not the hiring of Lane Kiffin that sent us down this road. The question I ask myself, and I don't know the answer to, and we'll never know the answer to, what would have been if Lane Kiffin stuck around? Dauber, what do you think? How do you think? And I know this is all speculation. For me, where I have trouble is I look at what he did at USC, and USC had a ton of talent when he went out there, and he did not succeed. But I think the Lane Kiffin we see now at Ole Miss is a mature, more grown-up Lane Kiffin, and definitely. I don't know that he's going to succeed there. But what could have been if he had stuck around at Tennessee?
Well, what do I think would have happened?
I mean, that's all we can do.
I think we would have ended up with sanctions and NCAA trouble for violations.
Yeah, very possible. Highly likely.
Yeah, there was definitely some wildness going. I mean, we talked about you had the robbery issue. You had the hostess gate. You had a lot. Now they were recruiting well. And
let's just think about the last two things you said, and let's talk about recruiting.
Yeah, I guess that was you didn't have NIL, you couldn't pay them then, so you had hostesses.
You paid somebody else. This is
Auburn,
how far we fall.
Auburn got away with a lot of paying in different ways for years, so I guess Tennessee decided to follow suit.
You guys have, I thought I had a train of thought and a point I was going to make, and it just fell off the rails. But it's going back to what would have happened. Football standpoint, Dauber, let's not talk about hostesses and all this stuff and sanctions. As a coach, as a football coach.
Right. We've said just how competitive this team was in big time games. He talked about and made the guarantees about, the Floridas and the Georgias and beat Georgia that year. Beat ranked South Carolina. They were number 21, I believe, on Halloween. And everybody's going to, either love this or hate this in the black jerseys, in the alternate jerseys. Got the win over a ranked South Carolina team, 31-13. Heck of a ball game. I remember that they came out, warmed up in their regular uniforms, went back to the locker room and changed and came back out to start the game in those. And I was just like, oh my gosh, just because everything that we talked about leading up to this and with the hiring of Kiffin and just that kind of confidence and that swagger, this was just something that, we hadn't seen at Tennessee. You have all these other teams that they do alternate uniforms. They do special stuff. That hadn't been done at Tennessee. And this was kind of a time when, the kids, the recruits, the players, they love that kind of stuff. To me, it really doesn't matter. I'm not as diehard and traditionalist that it has to be orange and it has to be white and it has to be – I'm more worried about the product on the field. And the product on the field under Lane Kiffin was an improvement. It was much more exciting, and they were competitive. They were competitive against some teams that they haven't been competitive against in years leading up to that.
Well, I think when you look at it too, you got to look at Jonathan Crompton. I think that's the first person you got to look at. Look at what Jonathan Crompton did under Dave Clawson in Philip Fulmer's last season, and then look what Jonathan Crompton did under Lane Kiffin. 2,800 yards, 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. I think Lane Kiffin can develop a quarterback a little bit better than Dave Clawson.
And that's something, Jim Chaney was involved with that too. And you've mentioned before on here, Jim Chaney's helped develop quarterbacks before. So then why couldn't he develop a quarterback the last couple of years?
Can I say something? Yeah. This is completely off. It's not off topic. It's talking about Jim Chaney. We had a listener that wanted to share a YouTube video today. And this is this weird time warp because we record these episodes ahead of time. Auburn game. Jim Chaney calls a play. Jarrett Garantano. Jeremy Pruitt comes on the headset, tells Big Jim Chaney, no, I want you to run this play. And Jim Chaney says back to Jeremy Pruitt, we've not practiced that play in this situation. Jeremy Pruitt says, shut up, run the play. Jarrett Garantano rolls out, throws an interception that goes 98 yards the other way. Tennessee loses to Auburn, and everybody blames Jarrett Garantano. That play call was made by Jeremy Pruitt, who overrode Big Jim Chaney. So I'm just bringing it up because you said his name, because it pisses me off how many people wanted to throw Jim Chaney under the bus. And all year long, I said I felt like that Jeremy Pruitt was micromanaging Jim Chaney. And then this article comes out in the media this week.
Well, and not to totally derail and stay on that, but that's also a disservice and disadvantage to your quarterback.
Yep. That you let get thrown under the bus.
Who was given a whole lot of up the road and grief for his performance. Yep. And when you don't practice something, when it's not in the repetition, and your offensive coordinator is like, hey, let's not do that, but your head coach is the one that says, yeah, let's do that. Who's that fall back to?
So just going back to 2009 and giving Jim Chaney credit for developing quarterbacks, I think Jim Chaney is a good football coach. And I completely derailed your thought, Indy Kid. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, you talked about Crompton and the improvement he made. That improvement was not from the get-go. I mean, Western Kentucky game, yeah, they look good and stuff, but think that UCLA game 2. They honestly had no business losing that game and still should have won it despite, Crompton had a bad game. But it was some questionable play calling. You had one of the top defensive tackles in the country for UCLA and Brian Price against 2 walk-on offensive linemen, and you choose to run them behind that, and it didn't work out for you. UT lost 19-15. They went to the swamp and played competitive. They played ultra conservative down there because they didn't trust in it, and
which they did against Alabama too. But sometimes you can play conservative, you can go conservative, and you give yourself a chance to win, or you can go conservative and cost yourself a game.
Played a lot better then. They started turning him loose a little bit against Ohio. He played okay. Auburn, I thought it was another one. I didn't think Tennessee should have lost that game. Auburn was running a high-speed tempo then. And Monty Kiffin struggled with the spread. Auburn was heavily spread at that time. But something at the end of that game, Tennessee was down, and Crompton, he started hitting a groove at the end of that game and looked good. And then the Georgia game, 45-19, I would still venture to say that was easily Crompton's best performance as a Vol. He was awesome on that day, and they just blew Georgia out of the water. And he played a really good rest of the year after. He played serviceable against Bama. The rest of the games too. I mean, against I can't remember much about the Ole Miss game, but they had a running back at the time. I cannot remember.
Dexter McCluster.
There you go.
He was
absolutely killed Tennessee.
Yeah.
Well, he had almost 300 yards rushing, and then almost another 100 or 75 in punts and kick returns. I mean, the kid was all over the field all day long.
Yeah, I mean they dropped the ball on that. I don't know. Monty Kiffin couldn't handle a high tempo spread. He just and that was the case with him at Tennessee and at USC, right there. But back to the whole point with him, he definitely developed Crumpton. The offense was good. Denarius Moore ended up playing in the NFL. They developed him well. Montario Hardesty, what he end up? A second-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Had one of the best single seasons in UT history.
Dan Williams and Eric Berry, first-round picks. Hardesty, a second-round pick. But I'll
say with it, just not to cut you off, but with Eric Berry, he was extremely underutilized under Monty Kiffin. He was not near the playmaker that he was under Chavis.
Yeah, I'm looking at the draft picks. You had Eric Berry, Dan Williams, first round, Montario Hardesty, second round, Jaquez McClendon, fourth round, and then Chris Scott and Jonathan Crompton, fifth round. So, I mean, you had 6 NFL draft picks. I would have just liked to seen what Kiffin could have done. And, I guess the real storyline, the real narrative to talk about in this is the end of the Kiffin era. Because, again, the firing of Philip Fulmer, right or wrong, the hiring of Lane Kiffin, right or wrong, what sent Tennessee down this road? I truly believe it. And let's go ahead and share up the screen and get it shown, and we'll play it, and then we'll talk about it.
Really awesome. Thanks, Coach. All right.
Thanks for coming, guys. This was not an easy decision. It was something that happened very quick, and the decision that myself and my family made. And we've been here 14 months. The support has been unbelievable here. I really believe that this is probably the only place that I would have left here to go, was to go to Southern Cal. And there's so many people to thank, so I'm just going to be real generic and say I'm very thankful to all the Tennessee people and the way they welcome myself and my family. And it's been an exciting time. And I know that I can walk out here and say this, that we've been here for 14 months. There's not one day that I didn't get everything I had to the Tennessee football program. And I know, just leaving that team room and looking around and the players coming in on this roster and what's going on in their development, that we're leaving here 14 months later a lot better team than we were 14 months ago. So I appreciate you guys coming, and thanks again for all your support.
Hey, Lane, out of respect to the Tennessee fans, you answered 3 questions for us. Been good luck.
What does this mean for recruiting, Lane?
We just got to let them know that we're going to be here. Our seniors, we had a meeting. We just got to keep the guys together. It's going to be a really tough time for us, and it's probably going to be make or break time for us. Just keeping the team together, just telling them that we're going to play together. We're going to be together. We've always been together. Whatever coach has been here, we've always played off for them. So this is going to be time for us.
That was before they started burning mattresses in the streets. Tough night. Lane Kiffin leaves in the middle of the night, take his dream job at USC. I don't know that you can blame him, but I think that decision is that's why we're at where we're at.
I totally 100% agree. I think it's Kiffin leaving and the inconsistencies and the way that it created a scramble in the next coaching search, the way that it was rushed, and the way that it was handled. I think ultimately that is what, with the combination of the stuff that we've covered in the first couple of episodes of this, but it's this that reached the crescendo that just pushed it over.
Right. It's like moments, right? We talked about moments, the 05 Vanderbilt game, the Wyoming loss, different moments that you felt like things weren't the same. But if Lane Kiffin sticks around and Lane Kiffin gets it going in the right direction, or if Lane Kiffin just kind of keeps the program stable for a few years, maybe we don't end up where we're at now. But it's the firing your Hall of Fame coach, bringing in the young hotshot, and indicate he's gone a year later, and you're in scramble mode.
Yeah, and kind of a funny story on that too is I'll never forget that night. I'd gone down to my parents'. Of course, Dad and I talked a lot of UT football, and Dad made the comment. He's like, Kiffin ain't going to be down there long. And I was like, what are you talking about? And, you know, we kind of bickered about that a little bit. And that's when I was a VAWLS member. I'd get the text messages at the time. And then text message popped up while I was there. I was like, we just got another commitment. And I pulled it up, and it said, Tennessee's in search of a new head coach. Lane Kiffin's going to USC. And I just looked at him with just speechless.
Do you remember the infamous Brent Hubbs post? Guys, it's
true. Yeah, somebody had said it earlier on that he was leaving, and I think the rumors had gotten going, and then, yeah, you got the guys. It's true. I remember
back in the day where they tracked the highest record, like when you had the most number of users on at a time, and it blew every record out of the water. That message board was flooded that night.
I remember I was so distraught. I left my parents. I was like, I'm going home. And I called another buddy of mine. Of course, Boogie, you know him. I called another one. And he just answers, okay, what's going on? I was like, you've obviously not seen the news right here, and told him. And he went speechless. I went home and just shredded a few It's Time shirts. Just unbelievable right there. But, yeah, that moment, the Fulmer firing, the Kiffin hiring, even the Kiffin leaving. But, yeah, they went in scramble mode, and I still think there's a part. Did they try to go cheap on the hire or what right there? How in the world they come to Derek Dooley when there were other candidates? I still truly believe to this day there were still better candidates they could have had than Derek Dooley, and somebody fed them a line of crap because of his last name. I know the first target it said immediately was Will Muschamp. That was the first thing it said. Tennessee's going to go hard after Muschamp. That's when he was at Texas. He was the head coach in waiting. Yeah, and people thought that deal would get done.
Yeah.
And supposedly Muschamp is one that suggested Dooley. I mean,
somebody else suggested Dooley.
Maybe Saban.
I was going to say, was it Saban? Saban has a track record of requesting coaches or suggesting coaches for Tennessee, which, come on, man. Maybe we need JP on here to give a rant about Alabama.
Well, you had – because I still think the time that it was down to maybe Dooley, Kevin Sumlin, I think, was involved. You know, Kevin Sumlin flaked out at A&M, but he had some good years. Kevin Sumlin would have been much better hire than Derek Dooley. And there was even rumors that they were pretty heavily involved with Cutcliffe. But what was it? He wanted to bring his entire staff with him, and they said no on it. Because I know Chaney and Lance Thompson stuck around the next year, and I think they possibly wanted more, but there was a portion of them went with Kiffin to USC, and then some other guys went elsewhere. But I know those names. I think the Calhoun name at Air Force, and he decided to stay put.
That's what's crazy when you look at Dooley's staff. Justin Wilcox as defensive coordinator, which I don't know how long he really wanted to be in the Southeast anyway, but Jim Chaney is offensive coordinator.
Wilcox bolted as soon as he had a chance.
Yeah, if you have a head coach with half a brain, and it's just another step in the process, right? Firing of Philip Fulmer, hiring of Lane Kiffin, leaves in the middle of the night, and the next hire is Derek Dooley. And that's, we're going to talk about Derek Dooley next episode. I don't know if I think the goal is to try to do from this point forward one episode per coach. Maybe we go a little long, but I really don't want this series going into the regular season. I don't want to be talking about this stuff during the regular season. So we'll see how it all, plays out moving forward.
Well, we look at the Dooley hire, and now, you mentioned Jim Chaney, Justin Wilcox. He had two really good he had some decent coaches on his staff.
Yeah,
down there. And I remember. Well, this is still we'll get into the Dooley era later. This is a Kiffin video, but that hire set him back. But I still don't. I still think this whole fall of it has just been so many folds to it. And Butch Jones was close to having it fixed, and he made two, you could venture to say, program-changing decisions that Tennessee's not recovered from.
But I also wonder how much Josh Dobbs saved Butch Jones.
Yep.
How many times did Josh Dobbs save Butch Jones?
But at least 2 years.
Yeah.
At least.
And look, I got crucified on this channel for defending Butch Jones as long as I did. I liked the guy. I really did. I liked him. He was probably my favorite coach after
if he would have
Fulmer.
just shut up, he would have bought himself more time. That was his problem.
He was very insecure.
Stupid comments.
And very insecure as a coach. But let me throw a different twist at you guys when it comes to Lane Kiffin. Dauber, do you think, because here we are all these years later, SEC Media Days, and Lane Kiffin is still getting questions about the University of Tennessee. His son's name is Knox. Do you think he regrets it?
In some ways, I think he does, but I do think ultimately, if he would have stayed at that point, being as unseasoned as he was as a head coach, I think that the program would have ended up in trouble. I think the Lane Kiffin right now is a much better coach than the Lane Kiffin of 2009.
Let's get weird. Let's talk about YouTube. It's kind of like this channel. This channel started out with video games, comic books, wrestling. It took a lot of failure to build to the success we're having now. And it's the same thing for Lane Kiffin. He was a young head coach. And it's like I said, when I say, well, if he had stayed, what would have been? And all I can do is look at USC, because he did not get the job done at USC when he had all the talent in the world. And sometimes it takes years of going through a process and learning and growing. I think Lane Kiffin's a good head coach now, and I think he is going to have success at Ole Miss. And I don't know if that's his final destination or if he'll end up somewhere else.
There was a rumor he would have came to Knoxville this past season.
That's a whole nother can of worms. The people, and I was on board. Look, we're talking about the coaching search. I'm like, bring Lane home. Let's go.
It ain't. It's never going to happen.
It won't. It won't. And I get it. And especially after the Jeremy Pruitt debacle, you had to have some stability. And I think Josh Heupel, ultimately at the end, I'm happy with the hire. I'm very happy and excited to see what Josh Heupel can do. But after person after person after person says no, it's like, just bring Lane Kiffin home.
Yeah. Well, he's matured a lot over the years. How old was he when he had a Tennessee job? It was 33.
Good gosh. Yeah, he was so young.
The youngest head coach in Division I football.
Yeah, I mean, and he had some good guys on staff with him too. I mean, he had one thing about it was, make no bones about it, Ed Orgeron was about as dirty as it came back then.
Oh, what a prick. What an absolute prick.
He brought his old man with him, and I just don't think Monty was cut out for college. Legendary NFL defensive coordinator. I just don't ever think it worked out there. But
I mean, the grind of recruiting and keeping track of all the college kids and all that. Yeah,
I mean, it would have been an interesting next season because you're losing Crompton, you're losing Hardesty, you're losing the guys you mentioned in the NFL draft. They had some good recruits lined up coming in. Some of them stayed. Fortunately, they were enrolled when this happened.
But you talk about Ed Orgeron.
He tried to get them to not enroll.
Told them to not go to class because if you go to class, then you're enrolled. Don't go to class and follow us to USC. What a dirtbag.
Yeah, and that's that ended up being an okay class right there. I think it would end up much better with it had Kiffin stayed. You were going to have Tyler Bray and Matt Sims coming in. So one of them was going to be the quarterback under Kiffin. I would like to see what he would have done with them then.
Think about Tyler
you would have
Bray.
still had you would have still had Bryce Brown. Don't forget he got him, and then Bryce Brown left.
Think about
Kiffin.
Tyler Bray with Lane Kiffin and Jim Chaney, and then Bryce Brown at running back.
Plus, you still had good receivers at the time because you had Denarius Moore coming by. I think Gerald Jones was back.
Look what Derek Dooley did with that offense.
Yeah.
I mean,
you added Justin Hunter and Derrick Rogers.
Yeah.
Which I don't think they would have added Hunter with Kiffin. He was committed to LSU. I don't think he liked Kiffin, but I think they were turning Derrick Rogers regardless. But Kiffin was on him hard.
For Derek Dooley to come in and pull Hunter.
Yeah, they did. I'm trying to think who was Dooley's receivers coach. I know he had Darren Henshaw. He had what was the line coach? Stand. I cannot remember who the
Baggett, Charlie Baggett.
Okay, I would have never thought of that.
Not either. I had the Wikipedia page pulled up. I would have never remembered that.
I was thinking he was a pretty respected wide receiver coach during that time. But there would have been some weapons down there. So it would have been interesting to see what he would have done with the offensive line. I think James Craig was a decent offensive line coach down there. I don't think it would have been all walk-ons on the line during that time either because they brought in Juwan James. They brought in they had a few linemen. I don't think they were going to get James Stone, which they ended up getting with Dooley. It would have been interesting to see. I think recruiting would have been at a high level under them. I don't think there's any doubt about it. They were recruiting at a high level when Lane was there. I think it would have continued the whole time as well.
But
comment.
But you drop off in wins every year subsequently. You go from 7-6 to 6-7 to 5-7, 5-7, 5-7. So
we're talking about Lane. We're talking about
Lane.
Right, we're talking about what would happen with Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I don't think they would have dropped to that under Lane. I think they would have had, that next season Dooley made a bowl. I think Lane would have made a bowl. I don't think there would have been the drop off.
That's the key. I don't think there would have been the drop off. Would Tennessee be winning SEC championships or competing for SEC championships? I don't know. But I think if Lane Kiffin had stayed 3 years, 4 years,
there would have been more stability.
Right. There would have been stability there. You could have followed him up with a different coach and been okay. I think if you pinpoint it, if you had to pick a moment, and I know we all picked our moment of when we realized things were going downhill, but if you had to pinpoint a moment, it is Lane Kiffin leaving in the middle of the night. That is what set this program back for a decade after that moment.
Especially after 1 year, after you had just had a coaching change.
Right.
Well, that makes 3 coaches in 3 years.
Exactly, which is
nail in the coffin right there.
What do you say when every new coach comes in? It's going to take several years. Be patient. Jeremy Pruitt comes in, you got to give him several years. Some people said 5 years. Josh Heupel comes in. Why do you think his contract is so long? Even with the clause of if there's a bowl ban, he's going to get an extra year because it takes time when you come in as a coach. It's the reality of the situation. So like Dobber just said, when you have 3 coaches in 3 years, that's what set this whole thing downhill. This is the moment. This is the episode of the fall of the Vols, this is the moment. This is why we are where we are. And you could have fixed it if you had hired the right guy, but
there were even better guys than Dooley. Kyle Whittingham at Utah, I think, would have been a serious candidate. Kevin Sumlin, Kevin Sumlin may have eventually gotten fired, but I think Kevin Sumlin would have been much better than Derek Dooley. Hell, if Cutcliffe wanted to bring his staff, for as good of an offensive coordinator as Cutcliffe is that I just don't know if he would have made it at Tennessee.
But it's
I
hard
know
to
he's a
say
good
that.
coach.
Look what he did at Ole Miss. Like when you look at what he's doing at Duke, that's freaking Duke, man. That's Duke. Look at what he did at Ole Miss. I was on board to bring David Cutcliffe back. I was, and it may not have worked out, but I wanted him to have that opportunity. And a lot of people talked about
better than Dooley. Yeah.
A lot of people talked about his age and how long would he stick around. And I get all those reasons. I wanted David Cutcliffe to get that opportunity because full circle, what have I said for, 6 episodes into this thing? Philip Fulmer rode David Cutcliffe's coattail. So what could David Cutcliffe have done?
I think at that point in time, that would have been the move. If he wanted to bring his staff, he brings them. What have you? Pay the buyouts of these assistants.
Look at Josh Heupel.
Money back from
Josh Heupel wants to bring his staff, and we're happy with it. I'm happy with that
Butch
staff.
Jones brought his.
Yeah.
I mean,
greatest staff in the country.
Common denominator in all this?
Mike Hamilton. Yeah, he was you look at baseball tanked under Mike Hamilton, football tanked under him. You could essentially say even though he added Bruce Pearl, that went in the toilet as well. Because that is minor as that seemed. He lied about a barbecue and was getting a show cause. I think any AD worth his weight could have prevented that. Now that you look at it. I know it's not a basketball episode, but Mike Hamilton was a disaster.
Yep.
He was an absolute disaster. So you could even say at 2002 when Doug Dickey retired was the start of it because Mike Hamilton, he could build some beautiful facilities. He just didn't know how to build a beautiful coaching staff.
Yeah, there's more to it than facilities. And we that's something the Danny White era, right? President, chancellor, AD, all in alignment.
You had a lot of admin change during these times. And the product on the field's one thing, but the hirings and stuff how in the hell was Derek Dooley even a candidate? He wasn't even 500.
I tried to believe, but when you sit back and look at his record on paper, it makes no sense. Absolutely no sense.
I'm like you. I tried to get on board, but it was like, seriously? Am I missing something here?
I do think they were looking for a cheap contract, trying to get a up and comer, and it just failed miserably.
Tried to find that diamond in the rough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there had to have been. We mentioned Cutcliffe. There's probably numerous guys that would have taken that job that would have been better than Derek Dooley.
Listen, this is the ultimate, go to Vegas and put it all on, black or all on red, and it's a gamble. And that's what we've done is gamble on the unknowns. We've not gambled on a proven commodity. Kiffin was not proven.
No.
Dooley was not proven.
But now we're so far down that road, you don't have a choice.
We had a
choice. We had a choice back then, right? We had a choice back then. Now we don't.
And like Indy Kid said, even after Kiffin left, there were still more options. There were still better options. The job was still attractive and could have pulled somebody that was proven.
Yeah.
And they blew it. They went with Derek Dooley.
Yeah, I mean, and the first season was okay. But, I mean, you still think of that first season, the LSU game. The whole team was on the field for the last play, basically. You know, the bowl game, that debacle at the end.
It's when Snake almost got in a fist fight.
Oh, yeah, you all were at that game, weren't you?
Yeah.
That's right.
With old Vols JP. Me, Snake, and Vols JP were at that game, and Snake almost got in a fist fight after the game with a freaking North Carolina fan. It's like, this is how far we've fallen. It's how far we've fallen. We got to wrap this thing up. This is the end of the Kiffin era. I guess next episode we're going to move into Germans. We're going to talk about shower etiquette and God knows what else. We're going to get into the Derek Dooley era as we continue to move forward through the fall of the Vols. Leave us a comment. What do you guys think? Like I say every week, this is your show. This is your chance to voice your opinion. Had Lane Kiffin stayed, would he have had success? What do you think of the Lane Kiffin hiring? What do you think of Philip Fulmer getting fired? Was it time for Phil to go? Tons of questions. Drop a comment down below. Let us know. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you click that bell for notifications. We are getting into August. Fall camp is right around the corner. Tons of content coming your way. We got to get together and talk. I don't know. Last season we did Wednesday shows, and then we did the Saturday post game. Saturday post game is nailed down. That's what we're going to be doing. I don't know necessarily what day of the week we're going to do that mid-week show, but we'll let you guys know soon. Tons of content coming your way. That's going to wrap it up for this one. Smash that thumbs up on the way out the door. For Dauber, for the Indie Kid, my name is Boogie Bentley. This is the Talkin' Vols Network. Go Big Orange.
How like me, poets sat in our chains, soaking moonlit falls, unbroken past this inundated orb that we draw home, and it's night and I'm alone and I'm alone.